Let's get started. How are you,
Sounds
man?
good.
Paul, thanks for joining. Thanks for your time today.
Hey, good to see you.
About that. Let's
So,
talk about marketing operations and um, all the fun stuff that you do.
Sure. Let's talk a bit about a bit about a story.
Okay.
At the beginning of every year, the story starts like this. It's the same story every year, right? Well, actually, it starts a little bit before the beginning of a year, but let's say it's at the beginning of the year. A company basically gives a marketing department an envelope of money to go basically take it to the market, elevate brand, drive demand, be sale, have sales effectiveness, and it basically says go maximize this money, and that sounds really simple, right? Here's a bucket of money, go make the most of it. Um, if only it could be that easy. And I think you probably get that.
Sure.
We both sit in marketing organizations, and it sounds so simple at the beginning of the year to go make it happen, right? And when you start getting down into the actual operation of it or the details of it, there are so many things that kind of get in the way of making things happen. So I thought we'd spend most of today just going through that and just exploring some of the details of what goes on. Perhaps you can
Sure.
use your examples, I can use
Yeah.
mine, and we can look at that way.
Yeah. That sounds good. I mean, I think it's a part of the business that doesn't get any attention. From a when you start people start talking about marketing or they talk about anything, nobody ever brings up operations stuff, right? And it's something that's near and dear to my heart from a project management perspective. My teams that I've always managed over the years have always been the I call them executioners, which is the worst word to use for what they do, but that's what they do. They execute all of the things, right? And they stick to plan, they try to stick to budgets, they make all these things happen. We hit dates. We're very much driven in that way, and so it's hard working, especially I'm sure for you in the position you're in, with a bunch of marketers who I've found to not be operationally minded in most cases.
Right,
They don't like a
right.
date. They don't like living and dying by a specific date or a budget, even for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to pick on that, I think that's mostly because of the typical marketer that sits in a marketing organization, right? You know, we the technologists, I think you in a technology space is a little bit different than the average marketer,
Sure.
because you do have more defined projects within the tech space. But the average marketer out there is a pretty creative bot, either someone who's good at writing, someone who's good at being creative, someone who maybe an analytics kind of guru that is driving numbers into the space, so we understand what's really happening and where the next best place to go get it. It's a skill set of being on time and staying ahead of things is not necessarily marries with those skill sets,
Yeah.
particularly the creative part. And when you come to numbers and cents and dollars, spending dollars and doing it at the right time frame, it's not. It doesn't usually come natural for those people.
Yeah. So when you sit down, you talked about at the beginning of the year, you're given, here's the envelope of cash and funds for the year. What is your normal approach to how do you start tackling that? Like, how do you start
Yeah.
enforcing the operational aspects of you need to create a plan, you need to create a budget, you need to create, milestones for these projects and so forth. What are those steps that you use?
Right. So it starts usually well before the start of the year. I said it facetiously at the beginning of the year, you're given a bucket of money, go make it happen. Well, we
Sure.
all know it doesn't happen at the start of the year. It starts usually 6 to 9 months beforehand. And it starts really at a strategic level for a business. Marketing is a fundamental part of any business. There's usually a balance between, they're coming at it. There's the finance side of things that's coming at it, like how much did we spend last year on marketing? What should we do next year? Um, there's a competitive aspect to this. What are our competitors spending on marketing, and
Yeah.
what do we need in an arms race to try to keep up? And then there's the pure, which is usually where we start, is what are our sales targets, right? What are we trying to achieve in the next period of time? And it usually gravitates back to, there's a percent of the revenue that we generate as a company that goes against marketing. And then that's sort of balanced up and down depending on those factors.
Sure.
We live in a space where we have a few competitors that are hyper spenders, and so therefore, you've got to somehow get to the market and have a way
Yeah.
to compete. And so you kind of got to balance these things, but generally it comes down to that run rate amount of money that you've spent in previous periods or previous years, rolled up against these particular dynamics that basically gets you to an amount. And there's some good research out there. IDC does some good research
Okay.
around how much money is typically spent in marketing at different area in the tech space.
Okay.
Um, it's you depending on whether you're a hardware manufacturer or a software provider, or of course our organization is heavily involved in the cloud, so more software oriented type of a business. And so that number can elevate up to 8, 9, 10% of your revenue.
Right.
That's come from a traditional area where a a hardware and service and support company, hardware company typically spend between 3.5% and 4%, and a
Okay.
services oriented company would spend somewhere between 1.5% and 2%. So it's usually a balance for companies like ours. But you end up with that area of spend that then gets assigned to you. Then you've got an idea of what that envelope is.
Sure.
So how do we come up with the best marketing plan? Well, you're back to planning 101 sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
um, Business objectives. Out of those business objectives, what are your marketing objectives? And writing these down are really important, particularly in a succinct manner. Most of those business objectives are coming to you from your corporation.
Right.
But writing those marketing objectives down where they can be quantified, how are you contributing to that sales effort, if that's one of the business objectives? How is marketing contributing to transforming to the next round of products? That could be
Sure.
another objective. And so then you have objectives, marketing strategies, tactics, and ultimately, you want to try to get that as like a plan on a page. And I'll give kudos to one of our colleagues, Carice Buchan, who brought to the table for our organization from Serious Decisions this notion of putting a marketing plan on a page. And
Yeah.
I think it's a fundamental thing. It seems again so simple, but to be able to put these things down, so you can capture pretty well everything that you're going to do on a page, is I think pretty fundamental to then allow each of your organizations to get to work.
Yeah.
And that's usually not something that happens simply. Usually, to get everything down on a page as to what you want to do usually creates quite a bit of debate
Yeah.
and generation of kind of teaming and meetings, and bringing all of that content together so that you can succinctly say, hey, what are we going to actually go deliver in the next 12
Sure.
months?
Yeah. That part of it is that I think that part is where I've always seen struggle across every organization in marketing that I've worked in, is getting to that piece of marketing is in a lot of cases, not leading the conversation around strategy and goals for the company. I mean, we have some marketing things in there, but typically sales and operational stuff and goals that we have around financial goals and growth goals and things like that are all the ones that set there. And then
Right.
it's like, it tends to be that, we're given, those aren't outlined yet. And then they're saying, people come to us and say, hey, you need to come up with a marketing strategy. And we're like, well, what are the corporate goals? And they're like, well, we don't know
Right.
yet, but come up with a marketing strategy. So you kind of have to come up with these strategies that are a little bit open-ended, um, educated enough to be able to say, hey, yeah, these would work for our type of business, and you've got to do that research. But a lot of times you've got to build those strategies and those plans on a page based on assumptions, and be flexible enough to react to those, in Q2, Q3, when you have a bad quarter or a new product is delayed or a new product is fast tracked because of the market demand or whatever it might be, that you got to say, okay, we're going to fumble some stuff around or flip some things around to get to being able to execute on this stuff. But back to your point of, if you have a plan on a page, that plan on a page is going to give you everything you need to be able to go execute against, because you've already got it out there, right? You've got it written down, and you can respond to that as you move forward.
And I'm sure you can appreciate this is that when you have that plan on a page as a technologist, that gives you a lot of sense of comfort, because
Yeah,
often you're well upstream, having to develop tools and processes and capabilities that allows us to execute on some of the things that we maybe can't do
yeah,
today, but we'd like to do tomorrow.
yeah,
And unless those things are written down, then you know you're just essentially out there creating technology for technology's sake. Unless there's
yeah,
some purpose to it, unless there's some deliverable that it's going to deliver, then that's what really generally creates the impetus and the why as to why stuff in your area actually
yeah,
happens, right?
yeah. That's one of the things that it's been the hardest for me in my position to teach the people that are on my teams. And this is every team, is trying to get them to understand that I don't have a crystal ball that I can look in and say, here's the answers, but I do have gut feel, some business sense, some business acumen. I pay attention in meetings that happened 6 months ago and make notes about the potential trend of where somebody's going to want to go with something. Because, like, you're right, like, I have to, in a lot of cases, I have to hedge my bet that the organization or the marketers are going to need this piece of tech that I'm going to deliver, but it's going to take me 4 months, and I need to have started working on it 4 months before they think about the fact that they need it.
Right.
And so I'd probably be good at stock trading if I paid attention to that, just because I kind of like figured out this pattern of how to think, into the future and what's going to happen. But it's one of those that's it's probably the hardest thing to do from a planning perspective. But back to what you're saying is, if you have a plan, you write it down. I mean, that's the biggest thing that I've found, that if you go back and look at any marketing program or anything that we've done here, or I've done at other organizations, anything that's come back and said this just didn't work well, most of the time it's because it wasn't written down. Like,
Right.
we didn't have it as a plan on a page. We didn't have just the key elements of what is your goal, what are your metrics, what are you trying to accomplish, who's your audience, just those simple little things. You
Right.
can go back and go, oh well, we didn't write those down, so that's probably why this failed. I mean, you can tie those together pretty closely.
Yeah, so then kind of coming back to this, you've got your plan on a page. You're starting to talk about creating individual projects that follow in after that. Um, but before you get there, then there's this notion of, okay, how do you split up? Who should get what?
Yeah,
And that's one of the challenging parts, because of course it doesn't matter how much is in your envelope at the start of the year. You can always find a way to spend more than you actually have. I think that's
yeah,
pretty classic of any organization I've ever been in. There are always more needs than there are than there are resources. So then it's like, okay, how do we split this up? And again, there's some good benchmarks out there that help you guide as a marketing ops team. You have to be on the pulse of your marketing organization. Depending on your strategy in terms of how you're going to market with marketing, you may have you may over rotate to some degree to a certain element like digital demand generation as a path forward, that we're
Sure.
going to emphasize investment in that sort of area and forego other areas of marketing because that's where we think that we can have more effectiveness. Um, but there's generally a sort of as we all know as marketers, unless you've spread your investment across a number of, let's call them bets on the table between brand and demand generation and sales execution, and then your operations and tech that's over the top of all of that. Generally, you've got 20% in brand, you've got about 40 to 50% in your demand gen space, maybe another 30% in sales effectiveness, with about 10 to 15 in ops and tech. I mean, that's generally how I kind of think of a marketing plan to start with, and then you sort of go from there, and balance out depending on the emphasis of the group. And then once you've sort of got those buckets set aside, then there's just basically an element of, okay, you start to leverage the teams that you have. You leverage the expertise. They know how much money they've got.
Yeah.
Okay, go build your plan. You've got your plan on a page. You've got basically the general amount that you have. You have a bit of back and forth that always happens sort of in that Q4 early part of the year time frame where everybody's sort of haggling over what they'd like to do in the next 12 months. But essentially, you use that as a benchmark, and then you just work with each of the teams to build out their individual plans,
Yeah.
and then their individual project plans. So it's quite an intensive um, exercise that usually comes at the same time as you're trying to close out a financial year the year
Yeah.
before. And you just what invariably happens is we just don't do it as well as we all
Sure.
should.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially a lot of organizations, it's fiscal year is their calendar year lines up with their
Right.
fiscal year. So, it's Christmas time, it's New Year's time, it's vacation time, the year's winding down. Everybody wants to do stuff that's not work related, and you're cramming in all of this very important financial work at the last minute of the years, to go through that. When you talked about the different buckets of spend, how have you seen that change over time? Or have you seen that change over time? Has it pretty much been the
Yeah.
same? It's just a new flavor for
Well,
digital?
I think fundamentally that, brand execution, demand generation, sales, that those buckets have stay pretty constant.
Yeah,
And I should say, you also have to pay for your people. And so I should have
sure.
said up front, the first thing you do is you work towards a benchmark. And typically, most marketing organizations are going to work to, of their envelope of money, 30% is going to be on people and 70% is going to be on programs to execute, campaigns or
Right.
whatever we're going to spend on outside company agencies, services, technology, all that kind of stuff. Um, so with your 70% less, then that breakout between brand, demand, sales, it's generally been the same. But what I've seen is a shift in where like demand generating exercise, particularly with COVID in the last sort of year to year and a half, we've certainly seen a shift away from sort of face to face and
Yeah.
events. Definitely a shift towards digital and demand generation execution, is the trend that I've seen. Just observing other companies and trying to figure out what they're spending their money's on. But there's been that shift. Um, Sales enablement probably because of that shift has sort of had some of that come away from that sort of bucket of money
Yeah.
into a demand sort of bucket. I think also what is probably a little bit under the radar is what used to be sort of overhead for technology and so forth. I think there's been certainly in the last 5 years
Yeah.
an influx of investment in tools and
Right.
processes so that the need for generating analytics and so forth and execution in a digital world is certainly there's been an emphasis there and probably an elevation of investment in those spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just in my career, I've seen the shift in spend from typical IT budgets over into marketing budgets because of all the tools, because of the analytics, because of the ability to measure and see what you can do with different things there. That has been a huge fundamental shift in all the organizations I've worked in. So um, yeah, I mean, I think when you look at we've talked about a lot of the big picture stuff here and the planning and so forth.
Yeah,
There's a ton of operational day-to-day stuff that you have
yeah.
to manage, right?
Right.
And I'll pick on the fact that I spent a good hour this morning working on a report for you uh, that uh, that you'll get at
Uh-oh.
some point.
It took too long.
Well, there's a couple of different reports, but I think just operationally, just getting people to um, visibility into marketing, right? Visibility into the work that we're doing, visibility, it's a challenge. It's part of the whole managing up aspect, right? And a lot of people look at that as like, well, I'm managing up, so I make sure my boss knows what I'm doing and so forth and what my team's doing. But organizationally, we've got to do the same, right? So we've got to like roll that up into here's what the marketing team does, and
Yeah,
here's the impacts that they're making. What are
right.
some of the things that you do in that area to help communicate out that value of effort beyond just the metrics of, we spent this much and this many qualified leads came in?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there's the dashboarding coming out of the demand gen team that we try to roll up and push up upstream into our organization, so there's more visibility. I myself try to give some visibility to our the financial aspects of our operations, which unfortunately, this is the practicality of dealing with it on a day to day. Is that we all live in a business, and usually you've got a window of time to execute on your project, and when you're trying to have a million, well, let's say 40 or 50 things all happening at once, all heading down the
Yeah,
road, being able to manage those so that they all land and the dollars land where we said they were going to land is often pretty tricky. So we'll get onto that here in a minute. Other things that sort of roll up is just general progress on projects. One of those things you were working on is just sort of being able to roll up, okay, what are the big rocks? What are the things that have to happen this year? If these things happen, then the other things will follow. Understanding which ones those are and being uh, very particular about are those hitting their stride, hitting their sort of basic milestones, having progress move forward, just from just a general sort of tracking perspective.
yeah,
And then also just in general, health of the organization kind of perspective. In this world we live in, people come and go from companies. It means that things go faster and slower.
yeah,
So just being able to understand, where our potential gaps might be in terms of hitting those milestones would be the other area of just rolling up that kind of view into our marketing leadership
sure.
team.
Yeah, that's a hard one. It's in terms of as the information is, disseminated down to the lower ranks of a org chart, it's hard to show or to prove and explain the value of writing those things down as they go up, right? Um,
Right.
because a lot of times it's like there's so much minute detail and so many small things in there that when you start rolling them up, it's like, well, do they actually make sense, or are
Yep.
they impactful enough that the
Did they
CEO is
actually
going to
get
care?
looked at? Yes.
Yeah,
All those questions go into people's mind, right?
yeah. Until you hear him pop up on a town hall or you hear him pop up in another conversation, and it's like, oh, yeah, they actually are looking at these. There is value there.
Yeah.
I think we've all been through the exercise of some organizations when you do that kind of stuff, they don't look at them. At some point it's just like a labor of just proving that you have value and you've did stuff this week, through just making a visual long list. But I
Right.
think in good organizations and people that manage that well, your leadership reads those things and gets value from them. And I think it's important for us as marketers to be able to put together succinct notes and write notes that make sense, that are explaining what it is and the impact it has on the business to somebody that may not have, especially on the technology side, have any idea what the hell an API is, and it's like,
Yeah.
we spent a week working on an API. Okay, great. It's like, well, what is that going to do for us? It's like, okay, well, you got to explain that, you got to put it in layman's terms somewhat.
Right. Being able to communicate the value of what you're doing. It's often well understood to the individual that's running the project, but not well understood in terms of the context of how it's going to happen, or how it's going to impact that initial plan that
Yeah,
you put together at the end of last year, the previous year.
yeah,
So one thing that I touched on there a minute ago was, how once you have that budget, like I'm talking to you now, Mike,
yeah,
you have an amount of money to go spend. And we did the planning. We got it in kind of the quarterly amounts. We hopefully got it in monthly amounts.
yeah,
And it's sort of sitting there in January, just all sort of plonked out through to the end of the year, right? So,
yeah,
but how do you make sure you get that spent? Which is, I think of it as getting the budget spent, but in terms of the team, it's more about how do we make sure we execute in the timing that we
right,
predict, right?
yeah,
Because that's fundamentally important for a marketing organization. I think this is something that's really lost. And I was talking with a friend the other day, who's in the IT space, and I was telling him about this particular problem, and that is, not being able to execute on time, and then what ends up happening is you sort of lose the ability to spend your budget because we work in a business, and a business, when we say we're going to spend this amount of money in a certain period of time, expects it to happen, and then in
yeah,
the next period of time, it's like it should be this thing, the next series of things.
yeah,
And apparently, this is a common problem in IT as well, which essentially is, you know, rooted in the fact that predictability of any project in a time frame is so difficult. And I empathize with a lot of with our marketing team, because I usually am the bearer of bad news,
yeah,
and I see it sort of like it's sort of like you got 40 projects. Well, let's say 40 is probably too many. Quarter. And we don't really want to know when we are starting these off. We want them to know when they're all going to finish at the same time at the
sure,
end,
yeah,
with a varying amount of time that it needs to get anything done, execution. And often most people, I mean, the average person doesn't really think in those sort of terms, sort of working back from an endpoint, um, which is sort of correlated to another topic we're going to talk about
yeah,
here in a minute. But working back from an endpoint, and executing all these things when you're juggling multiple balls in the air, so that you hit that deliverable, and ultimately the project gets finished and the money gets spent.
yeah,
And so what we have is that dynamic going on versus a very pragmatic financial dynamic going on, which is I live in a business that operates on quarterly financials,
Yeah.
and revenue is just as important as cost, or cost is just as important as revenue. And so that cost needs to land.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what I spend my time on is just evaluating that and trying to work with teams. And often, like I said, I'm seen as the bearer of bad news when often all we're trying to do is, okay, we really need to get a wriggle on because I'm seeing
Yeah.
the hatch that could come where a budget gets lost, you know?
Yeah. I think so for me in the tech space of it, it's actually some of it's easy, because there's fixed costs for platforms, stuff
Right.
like that. It's like, that's cost what it costs, right? My only variable in that is whether I can negotiate a better contract, multi-year contract, get better rates on something, whatever it might be to bring prices down on that. But, they're companies like our company and they want to grow, right? They want to grow their revenue, so things cost a little more over time.
Right.
Where I get into the variable costs is around programming and the building of whatever it might be, assets and sites and coding and things like that, and implementation of systems and stuff. When you start looking in those pieces, the part that I always see that gets us off in the wrong way is in the very beginning. We start off and we see this huge bucket of money and we say, oh, we got all the money, we got all the time, we got a timeline, we got a project plan, oh, there's everything's fine. And in the beginning, most people are not very conservative with their budgets. Um, I've found in a lot of projects, and they tend to go out and just start spending. And oh, okay, great. Well, then to your point, 6 months in, a quarter's happened. Maybe we didn't have a great quarter, whatever it might be, and we need to cut back on spend, and we start to look where can we cut back. Well, we can't cut back on fixed costs because we've got these platforms that we have to pay for, and they're committed. Well, we got to go projects. We got to start looking at these projects. What's happening there? We need to start cutting back. And the good projects, and if you manage it properly, I do the inverse of what most people do. I'm extremely conservative in the first few weeks and months of a project and nitpicking every dime that we spend and every minute we spend on something. And then when we get to the end, it's like, okay, now we actually have a little room to breathe. Yes, we can run into some issues. We can push project timeline a week or 2 weeks or whatever it might be. We can incur that expense because we were so conservative up front with it. And so a lot of times mentally for me, I look at it and come in and say, let's just say I have $100,000 to do a project. I actually look at it and say I only have $50,000. And I kind of
Right.
put that in my head mentally so that I can say, okay, I only have 50,000. I need to spend 100,000, but I don't have 100. I need to be concerned. I need to try to squeeze this. And so I do all the things I can up front to squeeze it so that those conversations when you come and say, hey, Mike, we need to cut your project back, or we can't, land this expense can't land here. It needs to land there, or we need a, whatever it might be. We have some flexibility with that because I've tried to be conservative up front. But yeah, it's kind of it's just a management of money and perception of what's going on in the project.
Yeah, and you're right. In your space, many of your investments are like it starts here. It's a service, and we're paying, and we know what it is. It's predictable, and it's very easy. The ones like you're describing there, it's a project-based type of projects, or the thing that has the start and the end. Um, they're the things, and I agree with your approach. That's the way to go about it. The key though is getting started, right?
Yeah,
Because you haven't started on starting the investment ticker until
yeah,
you've gotten started. And if it's an IT project, you're usually spending money right out of the gate because if it's a tech stack item, then you've got people involved and you're paying for their services and all that kind of
right.
stuff. But many times for other parts of marketing, like a demand gen space, or if we're creating content through an outside agency, or if we're going to an event, we don't incur those costs until the thing ends.
Right.
They deliver the project, and then okay, now we can realize the gain of that particular activity, and
Right.
therefore that's what lands. And it's sort of getting started so that you can then have these multiple trains going in this projects going in the same in parallel to land at that end spot that you're
Right.
after. That's that's the trick and the key. And my experience would tell me that the average marketer is a bit more bullish than they think on when they can get things started and how
Yeah.
long that it's going to take. And so, therefore, your conservative approach, I think, serves you well,
Yeah.
um, because then you give yourself a bit of buffer to make sure you land the thing at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've burned myself on projects before. So my conservative approach is by experience and hand slapping and going over budget at times on projects. So yeah, that was those are some hard conversations and hard lessons to learn. Those happened early
And,
on in
and
my career, so
And
luckily.
and don't get me wrong, I've sat in marketing shoes as well, and I've had the
Yeah.
same problem happen to myself and lived the hard thing of, okay, how am I going to explain this that I'm like a month or a month and a half late from doing this,
Yeah.
it happens, and then coming full circle back to the plan. The plan's as good as you get to the point where the thing's off the rails, right? And then
Yeah.
you're, like you said, manage your money from a period to period. And often marketing organizations, when they get to like the third quarter, are a bit in that fashion, right? Some things are happening on time. Some things we underestimated how long they were going to take. You had a few losses from a headcount perspective, and so therefore you needed someone to come in to really get the thing going again.
Yeah.
Um, and so therefore it becomes a balancing act. And so the last element of this is on a periodic basis. What I find myself doing is scanning the entire marketing plan, having a sense of what's really happening and when's it going to land, and then making
Yeah.
some judgment calls as to, okay, this money is just not going to get spent. We need to scoop it up and find an effective way to spend it and generate a good outcome for the company. So not spending for spending's sake, that's
Sure.
never a good thing.
Right.
But spending in a place that you can execute reasonably quickly and get a benefit. Usually that's in our, for us, it's in our digital space, in the demand gen space, where we're able to do either PPC or placement or some form of thing that we've already got going. We're able to amplify that and generate a gain out of it.
All
But
right.
the worst thing you can do is radically overspend your budget. But
Yeah.
just behind that is to radically underspend your budget, because then you're just
Sure.
leaving money on the table. And marketing's here to drive demand. We're here to
Yeah.
be an engine for growth. And if we're not spending our money, then we're not doing that.
Yeah. I think where I've seen that you get into the situation where you're not spending the money is you've created the plan and then you've got, five or six things you need to do in order to execute on that plan. And those five or six things are just taking way too long. And so you're into Q2, you're into Q3, and you're like, oh crap, I had $100,000 I was supposed to spend in Q1, but I still have six things outstanding I got to do before I can execute on that plan. Then that's where you get into the, well, maybe we need to move things around. But uh, to tie it back into what we talked about earlier around plans and communications, I think that's where you get into the situation of these weekly cadence of managing up and managing these expectations and project plans and deliverables and things that are going on, is to alert that this is coming. Like you know, I'm six steps behind. This project's in red. Whatever it might be that's causing me to be behind, so that that, hey, before we get to the third quarter, we need to have switched some things around, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm
And
running behind.
you know, and these things happen in every business.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's because someone didn't do their job right, but many times it's often because of good reason,
Sure.
or there was focus in one area, so this was an area that didn't have the focus, and so it's a practical exercise, and I think sometimes staff that have worked in organizations that I've worked in feel a little bit threatened, right,
Yeah.
about having to say, hey, this one's going to be a little bit different. That's okay. Just as you say, if we're communicating regularly and staying on the pulse of it, which is what marketing operations is here to do,
Yeah.
then you can make wise choices and good decisions, and we can pretty well get it all done
Yeah.
within the context of what we've got: time, money,
Yeah.
resources, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at just generalized project status, right, and thinking about, you know, green, yellow, red as your statuses, right? A lot of folks I run into, and a lot of this happens from external agencies I've seen, but also internal as well, is a lot of folks want to keep that project on green um, as a status, even though you have some problems. And it's like, no, go ahead and throw the yellow flag. Like, go ahead and throw the red flag. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to have a yellow status or a red status on a project because that's alerting people there's a problem and there's blockers. And if you're managing it right, you can throw those blockers in there and you can get help.
Yeah.
And you can also alert people that there's potentially a future problem or a future, expectation that some you set around delivery of spend, whatever it might be, that hey, this is going to happen. It's not necessarily now uh, if your blocker is, we've been screwing off or we changed scope or we aren't managing the project correctly or what, those are some problems that, yeah, you should be
Mm-hmm.
concerned for yourself. But in most cases, I haven't seen that in a long time. I haven't seen projects that have come in that should be in yellow or red that are that problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
And we had a good example of that. We have a big technology project that about that we're running through this year, and I would say at the end of last year, we had a kind of a yellow to red kind of status, and we decided to step up, bring in a few more resources. These are external resources, cost us a bit more money, but it was because of waving the flag and getting on it that those resources came. And this is a project, at least knock on wood,
yeah,
is running very well for us. This, now that we're in the second quarter, and looks like we're going to deliver to our end of June delivery, just because that happened before it was too late, right?
sure, yeah. Um, let's talk about something fun for a minute.
Yeah.
Uh, so you have everybody's listening. You have a strange Texas accent.
Ah, well, yeah, I affectionately call myself Texmanian because
Texmanian.
I grew up in Hobart, Tasmania, which is that little triangle island state at the south end of Australia.
Yeah,
It's an island, so it's not part of New Zealand because it's the same color as New Zealand. It is part of Australia. It's the sixth state of Australia. Grew up there, and originally came over here to the U.S. to go to college, and
okay,
I did leave for 4 years, but then ended up coming back. That's a long story, but yeah. So I've lived here how long now? Close to 25 years. Um, and like I said, 4 year window in the middle between college and here,
yeah,
and yeah, I don't really have I don't have an accent with a country of origin.
yeah,
Texania, you can
Texmania.
somewhere out there.
So let's talk about what you did when, I mean, you know, what I know, you came over to, or you played golf in college, right?
I did. I came over and played golf at SMU, Southern Methodist University here
Yeah,
in town. Um, we weren't nearly as good as the SMU team is now. They're pretty hot golf team. I see
yeah,
them on TV that whenever there's a college golf
yeah,
tournament, they seem to be playing in it. So, but yeah, I played 3 years at SMU back in the uh, I'm gonna date myself here now. Late '80s, early '90s.
Okay.
And back in the days of the Southwest Conference, for those of you that are in the
Ah,
U.S.
there you
that are
go.
listening to this, that's way back.
That is way back.
But yeah, golf is really my passion. It's the sort of thing that I love to do when I'm not working,
Yeah.
and that's what's brought me here. And still love to play. And yeah.
Okay. So that answers the question of what do you do in your spare time to relax and de-stress and so forth,
Well, I'm not
obviously.
sure it's de-stressing, but
Well, that's the
I
same. So,
over the years I ended up a little bit on the golf course. Yes,
yeah,
it used to be a form. It was almost like a second job. Now it is entertainment.
yeah,
No matter what I do out there.
yeah. Well, so I used to play, I'm gonna call it ball golf, a lot, and because I had a job where I could go play during the day, and now I play disc golf. We'll do the show and tell stuff here. Um, so I picked this up. I picked this up a year ago, and I know we've talked about it a little bit in the office. And actually, Saturday was my 1 year anniversary of playing my first round of disc golf.
One
Um,
year.
and I don't know why I wrote that date down. I don't know why I cared about it to be like, let me write down this is the first time I've ever played disc golf. Um, but I celebrated it by playing in a tournament. So I played my first disc golf tournament on Saturday,
All
which was a
right.
pretty interesting experience. I suck.
How particular are they on rules when you play in a tournament disc golf?
uh, they're pretty hardcore. So
Yeah.
it's well, I mean, to somewhat. So let's just say I didn't play in a. There's the PDGA, which is the Professional Disc Golf Association sanctioned events. I did
Yeah.
not play in a sanctioned event. I played in a local tournament that was a charity tournament that this guy
Yeah.
runs. But
All right.
we played PDGA rules for everything. So
Yeah.
um, there's a couple of rules that were broken. One of them being drinking on the course. Um, I didn't. I don't disc golf and drink. I can't do both. I do one or the other. But other people were out there drinking. But in
So
terms
what are
of
some of the
rules,
basic rules of disc golf? What can you break and what's the penalty if you
so
break the rule?
well, so there's the one of the things I've found that's probably I mean it parallels golf. It's basically like take the golf rules and apply them to disc golf.
Right.
The order that you tee off is the same. Um, when you get into the professional ranks, there's time involved. There's a certain amount of time you have per shot. If you take over that, they can penalize you for it, after you've
Let
been
me ask
warned a few times.
let me ask you a question. Like when you tee off, I haven't played disc golf, so
Okay.
I'm a
Yeah.
rank novice. I don't know anything about the rules. That's why
Yeah.
I'm asking these questions. So when you tee off, is it kind of like in ball golf, you stick a tee in the ground, you're not supposed to go ahead of the markers.
Yeah.
If you tee off ahead of the markers, then there's a penalty. So you put the ball behind the markers and you whack it, right?
Yeah.
So, but in disc golf, I've seen you all. You kind of run up to you get
Yeah.
a bit of a flying start, so to speak. So, is there a spot? Is it kind of like discus, so you can't go over a certain
Yeah.
place when you let
So
go of it?
it's the front of the tee pad. Your foot can't come off the front of the tee pad until the disc has left your hand.
Got it.
So most people don't have that problem. Like I'm playing rec league amateur level like with that group. Um, and in most cases people aren't running up. Like, we do like an X step or cross step, right? It's like a couple steps and you throw just to get some momentum. But you're doing the big pro one where you're running up 10 feet from behind to get this massive momentum to throw. The other thing that's different between ball golf and disc golf is that how you measure things. Everything in golf is yards. I
Right.
hit 100 yards, whatever. Everything in disc golf is feet. So,
Mm.
A really good amateur player, um, I would say amateur to close to intermediate, like a little bit at the top of the amateur ranks, is going to throw 300 feet, 350 feet as a drive. You know,
Yeah.
when you get into the pros, they're throwing 500 feet regularly. Um, so that's kind of the distances that people get into. But I think the biggest one the one that's the biggest challenge for me is the OB rules. Um, because you're playing in parks and because you're
Yeah.
playing in spaces that they're not really designed for anything else. Um, they tend to put a tee pad in the woods and then cut a very narrow tunnel of trees and then put a basket somewhere at the end of it. And that's it. That's the course maintenance, right?
Yeah.
There's no fairways, there's poison
Uh,
ivy everywhere, there's vines, there's animals, there's all kinds of stuff. So the out of bounds rules are always, if you're playing in a park, are usually sidewalks, which are all over the place. And so you're hitting sidewalks and all that stuff. And the challenge with it is that the way these discs are designed to fly, physics wise, you can't throw one 100% straight. Like,
yeah. And see, yeah.
I mean, a golf ball you can hit pretty much straight dead on if you're good at it. I mean, these discs are designed to start and go like this, and they finish like this always.
The only way they go dead straight is if you keep them perfectly level, right?
Well, no, even then,
In
because
no
of the
wind.
spin. Well, even then, the spin of it always it drops off left or right, depending on how you throw it. And there's all these different motions that you throw. And the disc, this is what's the crazy part, as you may not be able to see it on the screen, so I'll just explain it. But there's speed. Each one of these discs has speed, glide, turn, and fade.
Mm.
And so the speed is how hard you have to throw it to be able to get it to fly the way it's designed to fly. Um, and so if you go in, just like if you go into the golf shop and you go buy like a professional, like whatever, flexible shaft Callaway driver or something like that, if you don't know how to hit that thing, your golf ball is going to go like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so you need to, club down to something that you can actually hit, and it's the same with these discs.
So how many clubs or discs do you have in the bag? Is there a rule?
Usually,
I assume there's a limit.
I don't know if there's an upper limit, but it's mostly just amount of size and space that you have. Um, a lot of people carry backpacks. I bought a cart, which is like a little
But
bitty metal
but
frame
I
cart.
assume I assume there's like a disc for going long distances, and
Yeah,
there's a disc for going short distances.
yeah.
That's kind of what I meant.
So,
How many of
so
them are
this,
there?
so you can take how many of you want. I usually carry around 12 to 15 disc, and that's because there's a lot of them are utility, right? So this is a driving disc, so you can see it's thin. I don't have a mid range. This is a putter, so you know it's thicker,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever. Doesn't fly as far. You throw it differently. You have different characteristics with it. I think the biggest thing with these, that the difference between disc golf and ball golf, is that this is your driver, and when you throw this, you can hit a tree and bend it or scratch it or just do what they call break it in, where it just the plastic gets a little broken in, gets a little more malleable or whatever, and the characteristics of it change. So
Hmm.
it's not like, or you can throw it in a creek and lose it. That's another. I mean, that's another huge option. um,
So that's a good point. Are there penalty areas in the
yeah, yeah, it's just like strokes, right? If you go
so
out of
that
bounds,
there's a penalty area, you put it in there, you can't
yeah,
find it, then you got to stroke a distance and that sort of thing.
yeah, you can give, if you land on the OB line, like if you land and let's say you land in the water, and your most of your disc is in the water, it's you got to pull it out and you got a drop spot, right? And you drop somewhere like in line. You can
Yeah.
get 3 meters or 1 meter of relief, between maybe 1 or 3 meters of relief between an out of bounds shot. So if like less than 50% of your disc lands on the sidewalk, you can't shoot from the sidewalk. You have to shoot from in what they're calling the fairway, and so you have to step it in but that's not a stroke. That's just a relief thing that they do. Um, but all the rest of it, I mean, you have to put a marker down when you throw. You have to throw from behind your disc. You can't just willy nilly throw from wherever. Same with putting. Putting's all in the same orders. It's farthest out putts. You
Mm.
just go around.
So,
And
so
then,
how far away should you be able to hole a putt?
well, they have what
Like
they call
for
circle
you,
one.
you're a 1 year player. Like for
Yeah,
me, putting on a golf course, if I'm inside 10 feet, I'm thinking I can make it 1 out of 3 times.
yeah. So actually, where they tell you the difference between intermediates and pros and amateurs and pros is putting. So I was going
Right.
to ask you about that. If it's the same in ball golf, is that is the one thing that just separates the men from the
Yeah.
boys.
Yeah. Whenever you watch the PGA Tour,
Yeah.
like I'm a I'm a scratch player. So that's, 10 feet, I'm probably making 1 out of 3. But if you
Okay.
see the stats that are coming up for the PGA Tour professionals, 10 feet, most of them are over 50% that are
Yeah.
great, the great players. They
Yeah.
are making lots of those just in and around the hole. It's all about getting the proximity to get into that area. Because
Yeah.
once they're in that area, then they're making a bunch of putts, and that's how they go low and win a tournament that you see them on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the difference pretty much. Chipping and putting and being able to get the ball in the hole from somewhere around the green.
Yeah. It's the same for disc golf, and move it out from 10 to 30 feet. So they call it circle one is 30 feet, and there's actually rules for how you can putt in the circle one versus circle two. Circle two is 30 feet to 60 feet. So if you're outside of 30 feet, you can throw and step over your putter as long as your
Mm.
foot doesn't hit before you release it. If you're in circle one, you can't step forward at all. So you're within 30 feet.
Standing start, just throwing
Yeah,
from a
you can just have to
stationary.
you have to stand and throw it. And I think it's probably the same in terms of the amount of. I think that's actually how they rank it is they look at how many putts you make at 30 feet. So for me, 30 feet's still a tough one, and putting. I have 4 putters sitting right here on my desk. I'm probably on my like 10th brand and type of putter. Trying to
So
find the
you
one.
change up the technology just like ball
Yeah,
golfers
yeah,
do,
a hundred
right?
percent.
Here's
I mean,
here's my putter. I got
yeah.
this. I used
Is
to
that an
play with.
Odyssey?
This is an Odyssey
Yeah,
T-ball
two
putter,
ball. Yeah,
and I've had this for about 5 years. I had to, you kind of see on the bottom of it, this stuff. I had to put some lead tape on the bottom of it because it was too light.
yeah,
But so yes, I tinker. With the clubs as well. But I traditionally putted with a like a ping style putter.
okay,
A hosel in the center. You know,
yeah,
And I putted with a putter like that for probably 25 years, but that is probably the worst part of my game. I'm
yeah,
I'm I don't play enough or practice enough, and so I'm definitely I'm seeking weird and wonderful grips and so forth to make more putts.
yeah. I think that's the thing. Oh, and that's the thing for disc golf too. Is they actually a lot of the guys. I play in a club now. I joined a club early on, and it's a group of guys that we go play on Sunday mornings religiously every week at a different course in the Metroplex, which there's over 200 courses, and none of them are paid for. They're all free.
Mm.
There's one paid one that's on a disc. Oh, it's actually on a golf course that's well manicured. It's like $10 a round, but nobody likes to play it because it's not a technical course. That's one of the things that most disc golfers really want is like technical stuff where you're having to play angles and you're having to do weird stuff with your disc,
Yeah.
not just like a wide open field where you can just throw it and then there's 100 yards to land somewhere and then it's like you throw the next one. Um, we're really big into they put tee boxes like where there's a tree like literally right in the middle of the fairway and they're just like go
Yeah.
around it.
How obviously if you're like it's a tee box in a space and they cut a hole in to get out into the main area. So
Yeah.
what would be like a narrow hole for a disc golfer?
Oh,
Or what would be like, ooh, how am I going to get it through there kind of, are we
yeah.
talking like,
Well, the first probably when you're teeing off, probably maybe 10 feet is probably one of
yeah,
the smaller ones that I've seen. But also there's some that have in like literally have a tree sitting like 20 feet in front of you, right in the middle of the fairway, like a big tree. And it's got
yeah.
disc marks all over it. It's all scarred up, and they put plastic over them sometimes just to like help. Um, but they do it to make it challenging, to make it harder for you to
But
play.
is the fairway the same size as a real golf fairway? It seems to be it's a
Oh
lot
no.
narrower.
Yeah, it's like it's in most like there's two different kinds of courses here. There's ones that are in trees, and then there's some that are in the wide open. The ones that are in the trees are typically like 10 to 20 feet wide. And then they open up in certain areas, but in most cases, why I carry so many discs is the second shot. So your approach shot or your second shot up is typically out of the woods. So you're standing next to a tree, you're behind a tree, you're behind a group of trees, and you're shooting for gaps. And you could be shooting for gaps that are this big, you could be, this big, whatever. And you're trying to throw your disc through these gaps, but also get the angles right to be able to pull it in to get close to the basket. So that's where it gets tricky. And there's a couple different, ways that you have to shoot. And so it's a little bit less about, um, you're not so much worried about where you're landing. And so when I would play, regular golf, it was always about like, oh, am I going to land in a sand trap, or am I going to land here? This one's about, am I going to get it through these trees, and I'll worry about where it lands later. It's like I'm trying to get it to land here, and so I need it to come up, and I need to, they call it a hyzer, which is basically
Yeah.
just a hook and a slice. Um, and I'm trying to get it through these trees first, and then I need it to bend around. And some disc, depending on how you throw them, some disc will do that cut over at 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet from you, whatever it might be, however hard you're throwing it. And so that's where the utility part of it comes into. So um, it's crazy. It's a big math problem. Uh, so
So, so are there like some storied places to play? Like, I
yeah,
know you've only been in this for a year, and you might have
yeah,
seen your
yeah,
sphere of courses, maybe the DFW area, but
sure,
in real golf, I mean, in ball golf, there's
yeah,
the storied places, Pebble Beach,
yeah,
Augusta Country Club, these places that nobody ever gets to go other than
right,
those that are very refined and so forth. Has disc golf evolved where there are those sort of places? I'm not from a
yeah,
not from a like a the country clubby kind of part,
yeah.
but this is the best place to play in America kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's a pro tour, and we pro tour. Most of the players live in their vans, and they drive around from place to place, and they're dirty
Just
hippies.
like golf was back
Yeah,
67 years
yeah.
ago. Yeah.
And this year has been actually a huge resurgent in or like popularity in disc golf, and it's grown massive in terms of popularity. And this will sound like a drop in the bucket from a pro sports perspective, but they had the number one player in the world. His name's Paul Macbeth. He's won all the major championships for the last 10 years, 15 years, however long he's been playing. He's an older player, and he just signed a deal with an endorsement deal with a disc golf company that is a 10 million $10 or 10 million 10-year deal. So $1 million a year for the next 10 years. That is the
That's not
most that is the most money anybody's ever made in disc golf. Normally the tournaments they pay out at, I think the championship used to be like $5,000 or something like that. And this last year somebody came in that is the one that had that did the $10 million deal, and they took over, and I think they had like a $10,000. It was like 10, 25, and 50 were the prizes for it. And that was the most anybody's ever had out there. And
so
so
like
the
that tournament was like a $100,000 purse. Is that
yeah,
what you're saying?
yeah.
Wow,
And
that's
so
pretty.
but that was like the national, like world
That's like one
champion.
one tournament. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
but it was like the
okay.
end all be all tournament. And so the way they do the rankings in it and so forth, they do rankings for everybody, and you get these ratings and so forth based on your play and all that stuff. But it's not like in PGA where there's like a tour championship or any of that kind of stuff. Like you don't go into it ranked at a like where you're going to win a certain amount of money at the end of it. It's just like per tournament. You went into the
Yeah.
tournament, you paid your dues, you're going to pay,
See,
and you're going to
see,
play or
we could
whatever.
talk about this all day because there's a handicapping system in ball golf, and
Yeah,
I don't know, most people don't, unless you play, you don't really understand what it is. But
yeah,
like, I'm a scratch golfer, but I hardly ever shoot even par
yeah.
because it depends on how difficult the golf course is.
Right.
Like the course I typically play rates like 2 point something over par. So if I'm two over, I'm playing to
Yeah,
a scratch handicap kind of thing. And they only take like they keep 20 scores and they make an average basically
sure.
of the 10 best of those 20. So you can have 10 crappy scores and it's not going to
Yeah,
change your handicap. So is that same sort of thing? Is there an organization that tracks your scores
yeah.
in disc golf?
So there
It's called
is.
GIN in ball golf, GHIN.
Okay, so the PDGA does it, and if you're paying them play in a tournament, it's actually not just off your score. They don't do a handicap score. They do a rating of a player rating, and a player rating over 1,000 is just like that's what that's the best. That's what the pros have, right? It's like anything over 1,000. But basically, what they do is it's some kind of crazy algorithm that people have tried to figure out all the math on because it like I think every once a month they come out with the new player ratings. And as an amateur, I can pay $10 a year and be a part of it, and then they'll give me a player rating, and I just have to input my scores from tournaments. But it's more than just scores; it's the difficulty of the course, like you said, it's the par ratings. They also take into account your shots, how many fairways you hit, how many circle two, circle one putts you made, which
Mhm.
they factor all that stuff into to give you
So
this
are you tracking
arbitrary
this on an
score.
app as you're playing, or do you keep like a scorecard, like a pencil and paper kind of scorecard, and then you
Yeah,
pump it in later?
we always do paper and then I pump it in later.
Yeah.
But I didn't pay for the thing. I'm just like I'm just playing. I'm just having good time. But I mean, to your point, like there's some courses here. The tournament I played on Saturday, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was 10 over going into um 15, hole 15. And uh my putt, I made an approach shot with a putter. It hit the edge of the basket and it flipped up flat like this and it rolled into a creek down a hill, and it's what they call a death roll. There was a hill behind it,
Yeah.
and it just
Got on the
flipped up
side
and
of it,
just
just kept rolling.
yeah, that added 3 strokes because I have that's a stroke for going in the water, and I got to shoot up, and then I had to shoot out of from the bank, and I missed the putt, and then drop it in, whatever, right? So you know, I'm 10 under or I'm 10 over going into that, and I'm feeling good about it, and I'm like, this is a great round for me because it's a really hard course. It's really long. It's like 1,100 foot holes, 900 foot holes, and it's like one of the longest around here. And I end up finishing after the last few because that got in my head and screwed me up, and I hit a tree and went in the creek again, and then they
Was
have
there
they have
some was there some words said?
yeah they have Mondo.
Are you the quiet player when that happens, or are you the rowdy player?
I'm a little of both. It depends on the crowd I'm with. But they also have Mondos, and I can't remember if we ever had those in golf or not. But basically, it's like a tree, and it's like you can't throw to the right of this tree. You have to throw to the left of this tree. And generally
Yeah.
speaking, it's to protect families sitting at picnic tables or parking lots. It's
Yeah.
like, and so,
They
anyways, I
don't exist
threw.
in real life except the odd in-course out of bounds when there's a hole that's a dog leg that
Yeah,
if you go on the other hole, it's actually going to be much shorter.
yeah,
And so some courses create an in-course out of bounds, but that's pretty
okay,
rare. And it
yeah.
just means they did design the course properly.
Yeah. Well, they have these all over the place, and it's to protect families and shared spaces and stuff like that in parks. So anyways, I missed it. I went to the right of it, and then I had to come back and drop. So that's another stroke, And then I finished the whole freaking round 17 over, and I'm just like, oh, what am I doing here? I added 7 strokes and 3 holes. So, uh,
I'm feeling. I had a couple of them on yesterday as well. I
yeah,
had a couple of holes like that yesterday.
but all in all, it's been fun. The whole disc golf thing has been a blast for me. Just because it's unlike with traditional golf for me. The nice thing is I don't have to set a tee time. I just show up and play. I don't have to go with anybody. I don't have to follow anybody's rules. I could show up in flip
Mm.
flops and a tank top if I wanted to and play, and nobody's giving me crap about it. Now, if I want to go play in a tournament, that's different. And I play with my club on Sundays. We treat it like tournaments, little mini tournaments, and once a month we have a tournament round, and we play for little beads that we put on a keychain to see, what your ranking is. So everybody looks at, can look at your bag and be like, oh, you've got a bunch of blue ones. That means you're not that great. Or brown ones. Brown is that you got the lowest score in the whole in the on the round. So,
How long does
but
it take you to play around?
um, most courses are 18 holes here, so probably about 2.5 hours, somewhere around there. Um, there's some courses that are longer that you have to do a lot more hiking between holes and walking between holes out in Cedar Hill. That one usually takes us like 3 hours to play. But there's a bunch of them that are 9-hole courses or little 12-hole courses. And there's a 12-hole by my house, and I just run over there and play for, I don't know, it takes me 45 minutes max to play that one. And I could shoot 2 or 3 under par on that course all day long, because it's a nice little short, more technical
Yeah.
course. And I play it like 3 times a week. So,
We could talk about this stuff all day.
yeah, we could. And I'm sure everybody else is bored of us talking about this. But anyways, yeah, what's crazy, these 4 discs right here that are in this stack here, they all are different discs. They
Yeah.
all look so much exactly the same. But if you look at like the rims of them, they all have different patterns of flight numbers and
I'm sure it's
anyways.
all about how the air flows over them when they're flying through the
Yeah,
air, right?
yeah. And they're, between 15 and $30 a piece. So, you
Well,
know,
that's different to real golf too.
yeah.
There isn't
So,
a golf club out there you want to play with now you're buying for under $100, which to me seems crazy, but
yeah.
it is what it is.
Hey, somebody will go pay $500 for the latest driver. I mean, let them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, Paul. Anything you need to plug besides golf? I feel like
No,
we covered a
I,
lot.
if anybody is still listening, and you're still thinking about the marketing operations, that discussion we had, I would say time, planning, spend more time on what you're trying to do, and just be a
Yeah,
bit mindful about where your costs are landing. I think you'll find you'll have more success in executing with a marketing operations group.
awesome. All right, Paul. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Enjoyed being here.
All right, talk soon.